Hi and welcome. I'm Don Ridenauer. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Indiana, and this is Everyday Mental Health. Today I'm going to focus on a really serious and sad issue, and that is the suicide of Chesley Christ. This is a particularly difficult one for many people. And as a result, there have been, of course, a lot of news articles and warnings and concerns, some really sad um, expressions of grief by family members and friends because she was such a celebrity. So, what I want to do is to give you some ideas about suicide, some knowledge about suicide, who's at risk, what kind of things to look for. But I have a real warning for you at the end of it, and a way for you not to be guilty, not to feel guilty if someone close to you does suicide or even attempts. But first, there are two things I want to do. One is I really want to express my deepest condolences, my heartfelt sorrow to Chesley Christ's family and friends. Having lost a child, I truly understand the grief. And so I can't overstate that. Secondly, if you are feeling suicidal, and you're looking for some help here, that's okay, but it's probably not enough. And so call the National Suicide Hotline. And that number is on the screen, and it'll stay on the screen all the way through the video. Call them. They have trained people who can help you and get you to local resources. Okay, with those two things out of the way, just one other point, and that is my colleagues and I noticed last fall and early winter that we were getting more suicidal people than we had ever seen in our long careers. And it was very overwhelming for a while. In fact, I had a client who very suddenly, unexpectedly to her and me, slit her wrists. And I would have said she was making good progress, tough work, but good progress. And she described it as, I just fell off a cliff. And she's doing okay and is improving now, and that's behind her. Almost the same time, one of my coworkers had a longtime client successfully suicide. And my coworker was completely taken by surprise, had no indicators at all of any suicidal issues the last time she had seen this client. So the situation was so bad last fall that I could not get suicidal, and I mean imminently suicidal, adults or adolescents admitted to inpatient units because there just weren't any open beds. And so it was really a tough time, very stressful, and lots of mental health people were struggling really hard to deal with all of that. I'm not going to go through a whole ton of reasons why people become suicidal, but there are three main ones that I think are usually the reason. One is hopelessness. Despair and hopelessness. I am hurting horribly and it's never going to be any better. Closely related to that is the make it stop reason, which is I'm hurting terribly and I can't experience this anymore. And then thirdly, the I can't stay here. I'm so embarrassed, I'm so ashamed of something I did that I just can't be here anymore. This is pretty typical of people with arrests, especially first arrests. And that's why jails and youth detention centers have to be especially on guard for suicide, and jails are one of the most common sites of suicide. So, who's at highest risk? Well, it may not be who you think, because Chesley didn't fit any of these categories. And so the highest risk category is adults age 45 to 54. They account for about 80% of all suicides. Men over 85 are a very high risk group for suicide. And so what you see there is the shame and embarrassment over something, or chronic health problems that are diagnosed to be long-term, and especially with a lot of pain. So you run into those, and then of course alcohol and drug use can exacerbate all of that. The next group is adolescents and young adults. And there are particularly a couple of ethnic groups that it's very high, and those are Native Americans and Alaskans. So in that group, which I deal with a lot, of adolescents and young adults who are suicidal, that's where you see the second major group of people. So let me go through what the National Institutes of Mental Health suggests are the warning signs. Are there warning signs? Are there ways you can know that someone's considering suicide? Yes and no is the answer. And yes, there are signs that can be very helpful. The National Institute of Mental Health has this list, and it includes people who are talking about wanting to die, have great guilt or shame, and being a burden to others. And that crosses all the age ranges, in my experience. And then there are people who are feeling empty, hopeless, trapped, having no reason to live, extremely sad, anxious, agitated, full of rage, unbearable emotional or physical pain. And then changes in behavior. They're making a plan, they're researching ways to die. And in there is often among adults, but sometimes adolescents, giving away their personal items, tidying up their business or financial affairs, and displaying extreme mood swings. Another very common one is eating or sleeping more or less, either going days without eating or sleeping, or not getting out of bed for days. And then, of course, an increased use of drugs and alcohol. And those impair judgment and make impulsive suicides much more likely and much more dangerous. But I said yes and no. So why do I say that? Well, they may hide it and not do any of those in any way that you ever hear about or are aware of. That is the case with Chesley Christ. Her mom said in an interview that she hid her depression, her despair, through, even though they talked every day. Now, I will say that Chesley spoke out on two different occasions, I believe it was in 2020 and 2021, as an advocate for mental health awareness. And she did talk about what she does every day to protect her mental health. Now, she was a celebrity and she was supporting a cause. So people didn't take that necessarily as an alarm at the time. But it's pretty easy to second guess yourself and then go back and say, my gosh, if she was working that hard every day to safeguard her mental health, it must be a struggle, so what's going on? But who would think of that? It's easy to think of afterwards. All you would be doing is applauding her at the time for supporting such a worthy cause. So I mentioned those two incidents at work, my client slitting her wrists and another coworker's client actually suiciding. And so I really want to point out to you that we're trained. We know a lot about suicide, how to handle suicidal people, how to spot it, how to prevent it, how to work with someone to overcome those feelings. And we don't always see it. They hide it so well. So, why would you be able to? And so if you're in the horrible position of having someone close to you who suicided, and you're blaming yourself for not catching it, you can let yourself off the hook, because it's very likely they just hid it from you and you just had no way of even knowing it. A couple of cautions about that, though, is parents of adolescents often minimize the emotional state of their teenagers. It's easy to say, well, I've got real problems. You just go to school and have friends, and your problems can't be that serious. But in the teenager's eye, they are absolutely that serious, way more so. And so don't minimize your teenager's problems. When they express emotional pain, really talk to them about it. Well, how bad is this? And then the question that people are afraid to ask, are you feeling suicidal? I get a suicide history on every single client I see. And it's amazing the number of them that have attempts way back in the past, or sometimes they'll tell me, oh yeah, but it's been a long time ago. And I will go, well, when was that? And they'll go, well, that was 6 months ago. That was a year ago. Well, that's not a long time in the past. And so I definitely pursue all of those questions, and you should too when you're talking to your kid or your friends. Ask them. Take it seriously, talk to them. Say, you think you need some help? And they may not answer, which is a yes, or they may say yes. I've found it very rare when I bring that up. Is this something you really need help with? They'll almost always say, yes, I think so. And I get a lot of kids who finally said to their parents, hey, I really need some help. I'm struggling here. Unfortunately, I get more who have attempted suicide, and that's when their parents became aware of it. You wouldn't believe the number of kids I've had who told me the belt broke or came untied. Or I had one teenage girl tell me that she was drowning herself in the bathtub and realized she had a new pair of sneakers coming the next day and didn't want to miss them. Now, does that sound really flighty to you? She was absolutely serious about killing herself, but she found one little thread to hang on to, and that's all it takes to turn that around. So take it seriously, ask directly, and then get help. It's tough to get help right now because we're also overwhelmed with the incredible increase in mental health issues during the pandemic. But you can find it, and if nothing else, call the National Suicide Hotline. Thank you for watching this. I know it's a really serious topic, but so important and so timely. So if you got value from this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in another video.